So in a 5th edition game based on Metal Gear Solid, there was your token bad guy group with access to advanced machinery threatening the rest of the world. Advanced machinery like what? Can you be more specific? Because my mind immediately goes to
nanomachines, son.
They also had some people being held captive for unknown reasons. Our job was to infiltrate, disable the weapons, and save any hostages we could. One of the powerful guard bots is fighting the party at a checkpoint. After a plan to pretend to be guards submitting a captive spy has gone too well, because the bot has a feature to stuff captured creatures inside them and slice them to bits on the spot. Oh my god, it's a Five Nights at Freddy's animatronic. Yeah. So during the chaos of the fight, gas starts leaking from a hole in the wall. The ranger thinks, yes, I've seen this trope before. The DM is clearly setting me up to ignite this gas and take out the enemy. They convey to the party that they have an idea and direct the party to lead the bot near the wall. The firebolt is sent flying at the gas leak. Well, here's the thing. It wasn't just like a barrel of gas the way you see in games. See, it's a whole gas production facility with barrels upon barrels ready for transport on the other side. The damage spread and spread, blowing up not just a big chunk of that floor, but the ceiling, roof, and the floor below. Also of note, the floor below just so happened to have the captive spaced out in rooms throughout that area. Do you hear that, my friends? Even now, brave heroes are on their way to free us from this horrible place. Let us pray to the gods to thank them for this salvation. Ma'am? What's up? Why does it smell like burning? Oh, shoot. Guess we can focus on disabling the weapons now. I guess even in modern sci-fi settings, the trope of somebody casting fireball in a really dumb location, it is universal. Characters in the campaign: Fighter, Dungeon Master; Paladin, Dungeon Master's IRL bestie; Bard is me, Cleric, and DM's friend, I'll call Dave. It's always a guy, Dave. For context, Fighter and Dave are dudes. Everyone else are gals, and we're playing online. We've played together minus Dave for a couple years. Besides Paladin and Dungeon Master, none of us have ever met or talked to Dave previously. Being in a first-time DMing campaign, it was a bit rocky, but we got through it. DM and Paladin's IRL friend Dave had just gotten back to the United States after living in Europe for a while. He asked if he could sit in on a session for a bit, as he's played Dungeons & Dragons before. DM said sure. It starts okay at first. On occasion, he just has some quips or jokes. Some are funny. Dave continues to talk, then sometimes over the other players in the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master, while not the best, is a bit of a people pleaser and doesn't know how to say it. She's working on it. But then, Dave keeps talking and asks to be a chaos god in the campaign. Yes, the gods of Dungeons & Dragons. Baal, Lord of Murder. Merkel, God of Death. And frickin' Dave. Instead of making him a god, we ask him to be quiet, and he is for a bit. Later in the session, Fighter and Paladin's characters are getting their fade to black closed door moments. This romance had been building for a bit, so it's an exciting, cute story development. Dave leaves for a snack break during this. When he comes back, he says, "Did Paladin sleep with the local whores?" Get it? You know, whore. Oh, shit. Crickets from everyone. Morning after, when Bard, myself, knocks on their door to wake them up, Dave interrupts the roleplay and says, "Open up! It's the Gestapo!" in a German accent, and I'm not even going to try to offend my minority German audience with my attempt at a German accent. I'm not doing that to you guys, I'm sorry. We just kind of freeze up at the Nazi joke. DM is Jewish and German. We don't really know what to do, so we kind of move on. He does various other little annoyances and inappropriate and edgy jokes, but none quite like that one. He's asked not to come back, and we've decided not to have an audience. So later I learned that in the past he mildly flirted with the Dungeon Master. He later said they were all just jokes, but he and our Paladin are now dating, and it's serious. We're all just very confused. Months later, the campaign's still going. Day free. We've all known a person like that. Somebody who never grew out of the edgy 7th grader phase. And yeah, I would rather have less of those people in my life. And by this point of graduating college, I don't have any of those people in my life, thank God. This brings up something I don't talk about a ton, but spectators in D&D can be really fun. My friends do like showing off the thing that they love to their partners or their other friends. And luckily, the vast majority of the time, the spectators in question are always respectful and quiet and undisruptive. However, if they do become disruptive like Dave here, it can really ruin the vibe. If you're trying to roleplay as a fantasy character and you have some a-hole making Nazi jokes, it's just going to piss people off. And frankly, if you're in a group where Nazis don't piss people off, I feel like you should probably leave that group. I've been playing 5e for years, and I'm looking for something actually refreshing. I'm tired of just subclasses. Where are the new classes? I never get to see those. Thank God for DRS Publishing. This video is sponsored by DRS Press and the latest addition to Civiland, the Lost Lands of Orfall. And yes, I did pronounce that all correctly, which should show how good this is, because I never pronounce anything correctly, unless I really like it. And yeah, I really like this. This is an epic Nordic adventure for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. You have over 40 new monsters, 18 new class archetypes, and 2 brand new entire classes. I can't really name another book off the top of my head that gives you this much content, all contained in an amazing, almost 300-page adventure for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, spanning levels 3 to 12. I just finished an entire Nordic campaign, and let me tell you guys, the FOMO is real with me right now. I really wish I had this book, so don't be like me. Back this book now and journey into the frozen wilderness. If you guys are interested in a Nordic adventure, then you could head down into the description down below where you will find the link to DRS Publishing's Kickstarter. Thank you so much to DRS Publishing for sponsoring today's video. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. Without further ado, I'm going to turn back into an animated rat so we can get back to the video. Recently discovered your channels and been devouring the videos. Thank you for the hours of entertainment and advice. Thank you for watching. Anywho, to my story of role-playing dread. Once upon a time, in 1997, I was part of an ongoing campaign at my local game store playing a D&D 2nd edition that played every Thursday. We started out as a normal party and eventually ran a full city, battling dragons and vampires. We were all probably around 14th level after playing several months, and my half-elf wizard, Matthew, was getting pretty powerful. Oh my god, these names are killing me. You got all these cool fantasy names. Arthas, Varian, Matthew. No hate, it's unique. Look, Matthew was getting really powerful and crucial to preventing some wild character deaths on more than one occasion. One Thursday, I ended up getting called into work as multiple co-workers called out sick. No worries, I just missed one session. I let the party and DM know, and they said they'd work around me being unavailable. Go to work and don't worry about it. The next day I show up at the game store, my friends give me a bunch of guilty looks. I apprehensively ask what's wrong and they tell me the vampire king that we've been skirmishing against ended up confronting the party, and rather than making a hasty exit when they realized things were in their favor, they fought to the death. Matthew had been gone on a research mission and missed the whole thing. But, as he was the only remaining character alive, the party and the DM chose to start fresh with a brand new campaign. I was a little bummed, but made another wizard, this time a human named Rohan. See, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, baby! That's a name! This campaign took off quickly with momentum of the previous campaign and our low-level characters who gained nearly godlike powers quickly as our battles grew ever more extreme. Rohan ended up pledging himself to an interdimensional god and started multi-classing as a cleric. We were battling mind flayers in the Underdark and having a great time until we ran afoul of a Lich King. We consistently squashed larger and larger foes, but that darn Lich King's minions were behind a lot of what we were dealing with, until another Thursday night when I got called to work. That night, the party opted to take on the Lich King directly rather than deal with his minions, and as you'd expect, the Lich King mopped the floor with them. Rohan wasn't involved in the fight as his god had pulled him away to deal with some pesky unbelievers. So 2 campaigns in a row, my characters were left out in the aether after a TPK, all due to my McDonald's manager not being able to staff properly. Getting saved by Mickey D's is not a sentiment I hear very often, right? Hey, the realization that you are hard carrying your team must make you feel pretty epic, right? No, but seriously, I would try to avoid having major set pieces happen when people are not present. Like, for example, when I did the ending of my latest D&D campaign, House of Devils, I thought it was pretty important for me to schedule that session so that everyone could show up, since it was such a pivotal moment. And I understand that's not going to be possible all the time. In fact, you should probably avoid forcing every single person to come to every single session, as it is unlikely that's going to work out from a scheduling perspective. You should be okay with missing 1 or 2 people. But for pivotal story moments, make sure to at least balance around the fact that someone's not going to be there, because otherwise, people might end up shuffled off the mortal coil. My roommate plays in a homebrew Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game with their partner's friend group. After every session, I always look forward to them telling me the tales of what happened last game in detail during our runs together. You are the best friend anyone could ask for. Wish I could ramble to somebody about my D&D games, gosh. I've always wanted to play Dungeons & Dragons for many years now, so when my roommates said they were writing a campaign of their own to run, I was beyond excited. I immediately started studying all that I could, watching campaigns on YouTube, and reading the player's manual in and out to prepare. My roommate and I are in a choir together, and on that fateful day, we had a gig outside the city. They had to go directly to D&D afterwards, so my choices for getting home were either taking public transport for 2+ hours, or coming to the game and watching them play. A chance to see these characters I'm emotionally invested in and have been hearing about for months in action? The answer was obvious. When we got there, I was fully prepared to sit on the couch in the back of the room and just vibe, but the DM set up a place for me at the head of the table with everyone else. I told everyone to pretend like I wasn't there and assured them that I was going to be minimally distracting and disruptive as possible. I would say nothing and just ask my roommate questions. I wanted to use this opportunity to learn as much as I could before the future game I'd be playing in. After brief introductions, we began the session. It was the Barbarian story arc, and the party were visiting her home city. We went to speak with the Pharaoh about the recent murder of her family and met a few NPCs in his retinue. Among them is the Taciturn? What the fuck? Can't you just say untalkative? Who made up these words? Among these NPCs was the taciturn and honorable captain of the guard, a warlock with a charisma stat as high as his cheekbones. The dungeon master showed us some art of him, and I got some major gender envy as a trans dude. This dude was just too darn cool. I wanted to be him so badly. Turns out, I kinda got my wish. After our dinner break, the Dungeon Master made us some very good pork chops. We continued where we left off, with the party trying to put together a plan of action for the big bad fight ahead. At this point, I'm finally feeling relaxed, settled in, and having a good time when suddenly, out of nowhere, the DM, role-playing as the Pharaoh, makes aggressive eye contact with me, which... Aggressive eye contact! He makes aggressive eye contact with me from across the table and addresses me as the guard captain. He tells me to accompany the party into their fight and lend them aid. Horror and fear begin to sink in as I attempt in vain to process what is happening, while the whole table sits in confused silence, eyes wide with shock and anticipation. The Dungeon Master reaches across the table and hands me a pre-made character sheet for a level 9 warlock. Great way to introduce someone to the game out of nowhere, yeah! To say I was stunned would be a vast understatement. My roommate was just as confused as the DM didn't tell them in advance he was plotting this. I am no stranger to acting in improv, so I wasn't panicked about that part. I have a degree in opera. But I was so caught off guard and nervous, I could barely read the text on my sheet. Role-playing on the fly is one thing. That I can do no problem. But at this point, I barely knew how spells worked because I was planning on playing a rogue in a future game. Hell, I barely knew which dice were which and what actions I could do in combat, and we were going straight into a big boss fight too. I was terrified I would embarrass myself in front of everyone and hold the game up with all of my many questions. I was thrilled I'd be playing the game, but also Also, I was incredibly nervous, scanning my sheet and trying my best not to get overwhelmed. I knew how Eldritch Blast worked already, and knew not to use Fireball when your allies were also in range, which makes you better than some of my friends. Fireball! I hope that little knowledge would be sufficient to get me through the one battle. Thankfully, the friendly party wizard next to me loves helping new players and was gleefully explaining everything on my sheet during the fight. The wizard wanted me to get the full warlock experience, which means you're casting the same cantrip over and over again. Full warlock experience, baby! He then asks if I wanted to cast Fireball. I noted my teammates were definitely in the blast zone and how I didn't want to be that guy, but he clearly already had a plan for this and used a spell or ability to move them all back just so I could cast it. I established a fun, witty rapport with my roommate's paladin prior to combat, which continued through the fight, and the smiles from those interactions kept me from being utterly consumed with anxiety. Not once did a single player make me feel bad for not knowing something like I was a hindrance. Everyone was nothing but supportive, excited to see a newbie having fun with the game they love. At least we were victorious and returned to the Pharaoh. There was some emotional role-playing and a difficult farewell, at least it was difficult for me, as the party left the city, and with it, they left my warlock too. Afraid I would get bored and spend 4 hours of his afternoon making a character sheet for me. Dang, I thought it was an in-the-moment decision. Dude did not think this one through. Hey, thanks for letting me into your game on such short notice. Yeah, of course. I think you're going to have a great time. So, like, how do I play? Like, what dice do I roll? How do I... Hey, don't worry about that. It's fine. Look, I just want to prioritize fun. You know, by putting you in the game. Like, right now. Oh. Okay, welcome to my homebrew Dungeons and Dragons world. Okay, so wait, how do I play? Oh, don't worry, you'll figure it out. Here's all the stuff for your level 9 character. Wait, how do I use any of this stuff? What's going on? Oh, what's going on? Well, we're in the middle of a boss fight. I was incredibly grateful for him spending all that time on a guest and trusting me to go along with this despite knowing absolutely nothing about me whatsoever apart with whom I lived. Truly a devilish, dastardly move for which I will always be grateful. Afterwards, I was secretly disappointed I wouldn't be able to play more with the group. A few weeks later, however, the hitherto unmentioned bard dropped out of the campaign. The Dungeon Master really wanted to keep 4 players, and the next story arc had already been planned, and it was supposed to be the bards. Because I already knew the story well, and because he liked the way I played with the group, he asked if I could fill in and take on the character. It was an immediate yes from me. I just had my first official session as a party member, and it was a wonderful time. I had plenty more time to study up and felt a lot more confident in what I was doing. I could not have asked for a better first D&D experience, despite the initial horror of being jump scared by the surprise appearance of a character sheet, a level 9 warlock, no less. I think of all the classes, warlock would probably be the best one, as y'all don't do anything but spam Eldritch Blast, so nice and easy for a newbie to understand. Now, I know I did the skit making fun of the Dungeon Master, but he seems like a really good guy. I mean, cooking pork chops for your D&D party, that is a WDM. However, this seems like one of those ideas that sounds really cool in your head, but when you actually put it into practice, it could be a mess. Jump scaring someone out of nowhere with a character sheet, especially for a higher level character, is a bad idea, especially if they're going to go right into a combat. Seriously, I'm teaching my party a whole new RPG, and we're having a dedicated session 0 just for me teaching the game. So to just jump scare someone out of nowhere like this, it could have definitely ended worse. But on the good side, it didn't end worse. That's what matters. Some content warnings for non-consensual drug use and kidnapping. What's new? The cast. Bard. Think Juggalo Murder Cult. The Monk. Dragonborn that was also a barbarian. Artificer, main victim and current partner, Warlock, cultist, and was barely there, the Dungeon Master, and me, who was just kind of a bystander at this point. The story starts in the year of 2022. I had met Artificer just through common fandom interests and become good friends. This was before we started dating. He started telling me about Dungeons & Dragons and that he was going to have some long-term friends, and it sounded really exciting. Think dark fantasy with touches of occultism and found family. Is found family even like a theme? Because at this point, I think it's an expectation. It's more normalized in Dungeons & Dragons than the actual dragons. It sounded like my cup of tea, so an Artificer asked me if I wanted to sit in and spectate the game. I said yes. Now, to their credit, I was somewhat new in the presence of their group, and they had been together as friends since around 2015, and I had only joined as the Artificer's friend. Mind you, most of this group was in its late 20s to early 30s at the time, with Artificer being the youngest one at 23. I was 19 going on 20. So to say they didn't interact with me much is an understatement, but honestly, I didn't mind. I was there after all for the story, which definitely was delivered beautifully. The Dungeon Master was very obviously skilled, not only in writing, but also in role-playing, and the group was very into it as well. The banter, the character relationships, the points of tension, all of it was done beautifully, to the point that I always look forward to the weekly sessions. Hell, I even brought wireless headphones so I could listen in while doing other stuff. It wasn't long before the issues started to appear, mainly for the Bard and the Monk. They both had some very serious character bleed that got to each other badly. The in-character dynamic between those two wasn't the best. They both had opposing views, and well, the Bard was also a cultist. In character. Thank God for the clarification. We've been getting too many IRL cults recently. So ideologies tended to grate against each other, which in turn would make the Bard's player take it personally and start criticizing the character. I must emphasize this, the character of the Monk, who would then take it personally and start shutting down, which then led to awkward pauses as the two had to go outside the game to cool off. This all wouldn't be a problem if things didn't start to escalate, and boy, they escalated. Outbursts were getting more frequent to the point of canceling entire sessions. The Dungeon Master had to mediate most of the time. We couldn't get any satisfactory character arcs or growth in the story because any type of self-reflection would make either of them spiral and make matters worse. The Dungeon Master started to go through some personal issues, which led to them using the game as a bit of an emotional punching bag, which was bad, since there were a lot of DMPCs in the party. I do mean, like, a lot. It was a party of maybe 8 to 9, and only 4 were the players. Not only that, but also the DMPCs were narratively important. I'm talking wife, siblings, apprentice, turned younger brother figures that just paired up with everything. It just wasn't great. So Artificer at that point tried to help as much as he could with making the tone lighter of the dark fantasy turned Grimdark situation, but it kind of backfired, making the overall group hate his character and make him the butt of every joke possible in-game. Yeah, that's what happens when you try to put comic relief in Grimdark. He's right behind me, isn't he? Out of game, they always downplayed him for being younger and relentlessly teased him to the point of making him dread the campaign days. Hell, the in-character teasing got bad enough that, in narrative, they made him take etiquette lessons with an in-game known wife murderer and... Diddler.
Wait.
They ended up being drugged by that same creature, which was an archdemon with a specific wine, which gives you the charmed effect. I don't recall the specifics, but he did that as a lesson to not trust everything that was given to you. And once the Artificer voiced his concerns about the whole situation he was in, the group brushed it off as, oh, it's just a harsh lesson you need to learn. All this just because Artificer was known to be a bit hot-headed. That, amongst other jokes that were made at his expense, it just all wasn't great. It truly ended up as a group of adults venting and punching their characters into the ground because of other issues. And I just, well, as a bystander, it was like watching the car crash, and I just couldn't look away. Worst of all, I say how much this was affecting Artificer and try my best as well to lighten the mood, even if I didn't have a voice in the group. It ended up feeling like a dancing monkey dance situation for a bunch of people that were old enough to be my parents, and one of them was, at least parent. It was really sad seeing this wonderful narrative get beaten into the ground by other outside issues, and it reached the point where the DM wrote themselves into a corner since they need to go to a certain zone to continue the story, but Artificer's character didn't want to go there at all, since going there would most certainly spell death for him and his siblings. The thing is, the DM sort of made him a bit of a main character, which Artificer was very uncomfortable with. So if he didn't want to go and the DM didn't want to force him to go, the narrative couldn't continue. And so the DM called for a bit of a hiatus to the game. Bro, can't you just have them go to a different place? Okay, your characters don't want to go over the Misty Mountains. Have them go into the Mines of Moria instead. It's basic DMing! I'm sorry, but if your game dies because of crap like this, skill issue! This, with some other issues between them I won't get into just due to the nature of it, was the last nail in the coffin for that specific game, which I was sad about, but relieved to hear. Artificer seemed happier and less anxious, and he told me how everything has been doing better ever since then. They were good friends and have another campaign going with a different dungeon master. Issues still persist, but at the very least, they aren't throwing their issues at each other there. I deliberately am sending this a long time since then. I didn't really think it was worth it or interesting, but recently, Artificer told me that the game master for this campaign was thinking of coming back to it, and asked me if I wanted to sit in and listen again, which I left it at a maybe, but I seriously don't think this specific campaign should be picked up again. And if any of you recognize the story, then I'm sorry that you have to work through your crap. I don't really expect to get into a video, but if you take the time to read this, thank you. Thank you for submitting it. And yeah, this is definitely what happens when you try to turn Dungeons & Dragons into therapy. Now, I'm not trying to say that you can't use D&D to work out some issues. You absolutely can. I myself have talked about some real stuff in my life through Dungeons & Dragons, but it's always stuff I feel comfortable talking about and my friends are comfortable with hearing. That's a big part of it. If your issues are leading you to fight at the game table, then those issues need to be taken away from the game table. Your group are not your therapists. I feel like I always get crap whenever I say stuff like this because a lot of people really do use these games to help them with serious stuff, and that's great. But make sure that your friends are okay with that and that you're not making people uncomfortable. Because if you are, well, it is an issue that you need to sort out, preferably with an actual therapist. Hey, that's a wrap. If you guys enjoyed, then you might enjoy this past episode of RPG Horror Stories. We covered a guy who was mad at a woman for role-playing because she's a mom? It's linked up in the cards, but before you go, please do leave a like on this one, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content as it comes out, and finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, you can go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. Another edgy joke to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, if you have your own horror stories, you can send them directly to us. There's an email down in the description down below. Send your stories our way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, in essence.com, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.